Greetings and welcome to another episode of The School of Life. Today I would like to reason about changing priorities. As we go through the various phases of life, we find that our priorities have to change, and that is sometimes compelled by our situation, and it's also sometimes compelled by what our urges, our desires are to get from that phase of our life. In the early phase of life, our number one priority is being nurtured and receiving food of various sorts, whether it's the love of your parents, whether it is the actual nourishment of the food that you get from your mother's breasts, whatever it may be, and and we need to have that confidence from our parents that the world is going to be okay. So we're looking for and seeking the priority of affection from our parents and from those elders that are around us that are providing us that foundation of safety. As we get into the next phases of life, we start to want things outside of ourselves. We want to have especially a lot of time with our parents and with our siblings and our friends. And over time, we start to depend less and less on our parents and more on our friends. But that time that we spend with our parents is still of critical interest. And so we want to try and prioritize some time for our family, and we want to try and prioritize some time for our friends. As we get into the next phases of life, and some of these phases overlap actually, such as the phase that I was just talking about, one in time with your family and one in time with your friends, and seeking that balance on some level as a young child. And then, of course, the priority of education. When you go to school, you have a choice between being a victim of the system and being there because you have to be there, which feels like a 13-year prison sentence since you're expected to go to school from kindergarten through high school. Or it could be 13 years of the greatest opportunity to learn and educate yourself that you can possibly hope to get in your life. So, of course, that's a matter of priorities right there. You can make that choice, and that's a priority. So, whichever thing you choose, that becomes your priority. Anyway, and to the next phase of life as an adult, we have to start to make different decisions. Once you become 18 and of age, you can make the decision to continue your education or to step out into the real world. Whatever that priority becomes for you, hopefully you're giving it your all at that point. Whether you continue on in education and you really apply yourself even more than you had before during those expected 13 years of education, the secondary education that you're getting in college and university is actually meant to drive you toward a career. It's hopefully something that entrenches you in some lifelong passion, so that you can then find yourself in a career that is meaningful to you, so that you're not stuck at some dead-end job. Or if you elect not to go to higher education and go right into the workforce, hopefully you're able to come up with a brilliant idea or some kind of an offering to bring to the community that you live in or where you choose to work, where your skill is highly valued and you are respected appropriately with the right financial offers to make your life worthwhile. And as you go on into this early stage of adulthood, many of us find ourselves thrust into parenthood at this early age. I myself was 26 years old when my son came into this world, and it really made a shift in my priorities right there, from my priorities being very much about myself. My focus was on music and on mountain biking and all the things that I really like to do, which made me feel very strong as an individual. And now, as a brand new parent, my priority became my son and everything that I could do to give him the best life that I could possibly provide for him. Well, so as raising my son with his mom in the beginning was very difficult and tumultuous, we ended up having to go our separate ways, and not for good reasons, but for reasons nonetheless. And she went on her way and blessed me with the opportunity to raise my son as a single father, which I had a really great opportunity to do. And then my priorities shifted even again to shifting from working full time to working half time, so that I could bring my son to work with me every single day for half of the day, and then go off and do some adventure or some other thing that kind of bolstered and strengthened our union and gave him a really firm foundation from which to blossom into a safe and healthy and happy child, which is all I've ever asked for in this world, is for him to be healthy and happy. we want that for our children, of course. So I had to shift my priorities once again at that stage of my life from working full time and having a reasonable amount of money to spending less so that I could work half the time and prioritize being with my son as much as I possibly could and really being engaged in the moment with him. By being able to be engaged in the moment with him, we never had a moment of regret. I involved myself in the school. I volunteered in his classroom. We went and did adventures every time it was a day off or a vacation. If there was a school day that was off, like a holiday or whatever, I would actually take he and a bunch of his friends on what we called a School of Life day, which is the reason why I call these videos School of Life, because those wonderful outings that we used to have where we would go out there and have an adventure. And for me, adventure includes adversity. So there was always some challenge that we had to face and overcome as this group of people. And we always had these memorable adventures. And I'm sure that any of the kids that went on those adventures have stories to tell about that. Anyway, so my priority had to shift from my music at that point to being a focused single father. And I don't mind saying I had been offered a really wonderful opportunity to play the bass for one of my all-time favorite singers in the reggae business. And I had to pass that up. And on a certain level, I was mildly devastated because the person who is Burton had really felt like, wow, this is the greatest opportunity. This is what I've wanted for all of my life. I've been wanting to be able to play with somebody who I absolutely admire and whose lyrics mean everything to me and who is so big and famous in the world of reggae that I would be a star. And instead, I had to make the priority be Zephyr's father, my son's father, because that was the most important thing at that particular time of my life. And I have no regrets at this point. At the time, I was a little bit confused about it, and I didn't really know what I needed to do, but I knew that the right thing to do was to be Zephyr's father and to take that responsibility very seriously, because you get one shot with your children to raise them up the right way. And what you do as a parent is what your children will model after. You could speak till you're blue in the face, but your actions alone are what they notice. That's what they grow from. That's what they see, and that's what they mimic as they grow up into adults. So be very careful with your actions as a young parent or as a parent of any age, because your children are watching you and learning from your actions. So the next phase of priority, of course, is, when your kids are growing up as you're an adult and then they start to leave the house, you get to reprioritize once again. So as my son moved out of the house, I had to figure out who Burton was again. That was a new thing. And I got to find myself more work so that I was able to get a little bit better pay and live just a little bit more freely and easily. And I was able to involve myself in many more reggae bands over the years. And I've gotten to work with some amazing musicians over the years. And while I'm not necessarily famous in the world of reggae music, I'm very comfortable. I feel very well known. I feel very well liked. And I get to work with some of the most amazing artists. Same like the person that I almost got to work with back then. I still haven't had an opportunity to work for him, but he has such great musicians backing him, I wouldn't want to get in the way. So here I am. I've shifted priorities once again. And now I'm working with one of the other most famous singers in reggae music, producing the next album, and that's to be discovered very soon. I'll be releasing some details. If you look at the Red Lions page on Facebook, you'll be able to find out some details about that in the coming weeks. I can tell you it's going to be very exciting for everybody. So again, I keep shifting my priorities. Now I'm to the place that I was almost at 20 some years ago when my son was very small, and I'm fine with that. I've lost nothing. I look back, I have no regrets, and I'm able to easily see what the benefit of those shifting priorities were. As I get older still, a phase that I haven't even gotten to yet, I can already tell my priorities will shift again. I will have to leave the workforce at some point, either because of physical reasons or because I no longer want to participate in that whole system. And then I'll be focused on taking care of the property that I'm living on right now and being comfortable where I live. And all the way along, one of my priorities has been to be a good provider. And I'll do another video in the future about what that means to be a good provider. But I have to say that that goes all the way through as a part of being somebody who's making priorities is you have to think about the priority of taking care of yourself and taking care of those people that are around you. For me, there's no higher priority than taking care of your children if you put children on the planet. That's the number one priority that each of us should be thinking about if we ever put a child on the planet. If we don't put a child on the planet, then our priority should be taking care of our relationship when we have a relationship with somebody else. If you're lucky enough to be in a relationship and have somebody that wants to be your partner, invest yourself in being their friend, showing up, doing all the things that you can to support that relationship because you're really blessed to have that opportunity. Most of us don't have the opportunity to walk with somebody else and have a nice partner who will support us in whatever we do and will help carry some of the burden that is life and help us through our trials and tribulations. So if you find yourself with a partner, that should be another priority in your life. And then, of course, your own self. So at one point in my life, I was very fortunate and I got to change my priorities because a different person came into my life to start a relationship with me and to become the mom that my son didn't have. That's my wife, Jenny. I feel very fortunate that she came into my life in the way that she did. And I had to shift my priorities from having been a single father for several years to encouraging and creating a space for a woman to come in and be a part of our family again. Zephyr and I had been bachelors for a period of time there, and it was really time for somebody else to come in so that I could actually demonstrate what it meant to have a really healthy and strong relationship with somebody so that my son would map on that. I mentioned earlier how our children are mapping on our behaviors, on our actions. So talking nicely about women, which I did very often, was probably not enough, in my opinion, to give my son the best example that he needed. It was better to live something in front of him. So I tried to show him what a really great relationship looked like by really changing my priorities, shifting to devoting a lot of energy and time to my wife and having her shift her time as well to being a mother to my son. And she didn't have a biological child. She came into this and I basically got to adopt my 7-year-old, almost 8-year-old son at that time, and blend in with us. And that was a lot of work for her. It was a lot of work for me. It was a lot of work for my son Zephyr. We had basically all had to shift our priorities from going from a way of living that we had had before that to finding a way to blend and create this family in a way that was supportive of everybody, giving each of us equal weight in the decision making, which I had already been practicing that with my son. And we were now including one more person in the decision making process. So now instead of it being a 50-50 decision, we were each having 33 and a third percent of the decision making power in the household, which doesn't mean that somebody gets their way and somebody else doesn't get their way. It meant that we would have to come to some kind of a compromise about which activity we did first versus which we did next versus which we did next, and we would reason about those things. That's a shift in priorities too. Instead of me deciding everything that happens in my life as a single individual, now I was working with a group of people, my family in this particular instance, to come up with game plans for each day and longer term game plans for how we were going to live our lives, how we were going to do this whole family thing, and how we were going to go about everything. Ideally, as you're going along in your life, you find ways to shift your priorities gracefully. I know that it's not always a graceful thing. Sometimes we are very resistant to shifting priorities and we retain some of our childish behaviors about being very self-focused, self-centered. And again, when we're working with other people, whether it's in the workplace or in our homes and with our families or whatever it is, when we work with other people, we have to shift our priorities from being driven by our own self-motivation to conjuring up a kind of a motivation that includes everybody who's involved and making sure that all the priorities are being addressed from everybody's point of view and that we give equal weight to each person in the decision-making process. That's one of the toughest shifts in priorities that a person can ever have to make. And there's no time like your work situation or your home situation when you really have to work with other people and try and create a harmony. Then that's where this becomes the most obvious, I feel. Anyway, I hope you found this video informative and interesting. I know it's a little long-winded this week, but I haven't got to do a video for the last couple weeks because I had to shift my priorities as I took a new position, which was causing my Thursdays to be very constrained for time. And I had a big water emergency for one of the weeks as well, on top of my brand new job. And so I had to deal with so many different things. I had to shift my priorities. Anyway, if you like this video, click like down below. Please feel free to leave a comment down below, or if you'd like to have a video of a different nature, leave that in the comments down below. And if you like this video and would like to see more videos like it, please subscribe to my channel on YouTube. I'm Burton Eubank, and thank you for your time. Bless.